Hi, everyone. Kylie K here with Kylie's Corner. I have my first external guest. It's a big moment for me because we have Justyna here. Justyna, I want to honor the Polish heritage here. Um, so, fun story. I'm not professional. And if you didn't know that, sucks for you, doesn't for me. So we are kind of going to fly by the seat of our pants here. And listen, I'm going to say something. I have been fangirling out over this woman on this screen here for a good year and a half now. Now, let me preface this by saying this woman and I like woman doesn't even feel the right word. It's this universal force, this goddess energy, this everything. This lady shows up when you don't even know you need her, but she's like there with the words that you need to hear. There was a moment where I had posted something on Instagram where I was like, "Oh, my story, my immigrant story," and you just said like this beautiful, like you're embodying this, and I was like, "Fuck, yes, I am." Wow, and
Oh,
someone said that and reflected that back to me, and I'm like, "Girlfriend, I was doing a professional photo shoot and I was freaking out going, "I'm not. Why am I getting? I'm just me." And you were like right there. We were voice memoing each other. I was ironing my shirt and you completely took me off my ledge. And that's what I
love
love. Now, you want to get a word in,
it.
say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Because here we go, not professional. Okay. Um,
Oh,
so here is my question. Okay.
yeah.
One doesn't arrive at this state of existence, of being, of light from nothing, right? So
Mm,
I acknowledge that you have been through it. You are probably still in it at some aspects.
always.
I, I want to get like I have so many women who are like at that point, right? You're like you've had the life thing, right? You've had the big life events. You're
Mhm.
coming out of it with such grace. And there are women that are still in it and very much in their victim mentality, in the I can'ts. I want to talk to you and I want to hear a little bit about your journey to this point and, what was a turning point for you in embodying this new you, version of you, upgraded version of you? And that's a very loaded question.
Mm. It's a loaded question, but it's a really good question. And it's one where, reflecting back on my journey, I've been sitting in and sort of unpacking the pieces of that story. It was reflected to me recently, we have to look back in order to move forward. And a lot of
Mhm.
us don't want to look back, myself included. There was a long time where I didn't want to look back. And part of my journey has been getting to this place of this deep, unconditional love and acceptance of what I've walked through. And what I've learned from that has been this forgiveness in the people, the places, the experiences that I've walked through.
Mhm.
And it's given me this sense of taking my power back and owning who I am and loving who I am. And also giving me my sovereignty back. That's the freedom that we're all looking for is
I love that.
can we roam around this earth just being ourselves, fully ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's the nutshell of what this walk has been.
Mhm.
But to unpack sort of my story, as you mentioned, yeah, the immigrant story for you being, Australia and returning back home. For me, that was Poland. I was born in Poland, and I was 2.5 when we had to leave the country. You couldn't leave there at the time.
Mhm.
And so, as my dad loves to retell, we packed up the little Fiat full of all the camping gear, got to the border and told them we were going on a camping trip to Italy. And lo and behold, when I was 17, I went back to Europe, went on my own trip with my best friend, and ended up at the campsite that we never made it to,
Wow.
unknowingly. So funny, like full circle moment in life, right? Like completing
Mhm.
that. So I was 2.5. We moved from Poland. We went to Germany, and we landed in a train station. So my story began with this, upheaval. Um, I slept in a suitcase as a 2.5-year-old.
Wow.
We were going for, now I can recall my parents saying we were going for a better life. And, they did the best that they could for what they thought was going to be a better life. So we landed there, and that was sort of like the sense of safety that I lived in was, the world is not safe. And so my own proof bucket was sort of filled with that energy. So we
Mhm.
spent about 2 years in Poland until I was 4.5. And we moved to Canada. And we moved to the nunnery with the priests and the nuns. They were who
Wow.
sponsored us. Yeah. So I don't have a lot of, memory from that time, but I do recall there was a lot of moving, like moving locations. We were an immigrant family. My dad was a long haul trucker. My mom
Mhm.
stayed with me. I was the only child at that time. And so there was a lot of rebuilding of our lives. And so, probably until I was about, let's say, grade 4, I had experienced, watching a friend. It's a very faint memory, but watching a friend go through brain cancer and like watching her brain surgery, like in a counselor's office, like a very random, faint memory that I have, and then
Wow.
releasing red balloons, as she had died. And so all of these things slowly were starting to build up, and like, wow, the world is really hard. Like we came here with this like better life, that background noise that I had heard, and it wasn't showing up to be that way. Um, and then sort of life brought us to my sister being born. So my middle sister has Down syndrome,
Mhm.
and that was really hard. I don't have a ton of memories as a 9-year-old kid at that time, but she was just magical. There was something about her non-judgment, her like endearing energy, her love, that I could just feel. And I watched the struggles that put my parents through, and what was sort of like the things I couldn't name, but I could feel. And a couple years later, my youngest sister was born, and I became mom. I became the 12-year-old who became mom,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
built that kind of relationship with a sibling that should have been a sibling, but truly wasn't. At that time, my mom's hands were full. And so I learned a lot of adult things that I probably shouldn't have at that age,
Mhm.
and grew up really fast. And so, um, looking back now, I can see now from the point at which I'm at now that what I had been doing this whole time was translating these unseen energies that I could feel. So I developed my sense of safety based on how well I could read what was happening. And I became
Mhm.
an energy detective, in a way. So it's gifted me this piece now where I can hear, in the beautiful, like so much gratitude towards you for what you said. I deeply receiving that. But in those moments when someone's speaking and when someone is sharing a bit of something, I can hear what's sort of underlying of that.
Mhm.
And, it's a gift and a curse. all at the same time, as you know, with your work.
Mhm.
And it ends up being a piece of the puzzle, though, that moves us forward. And so in all of that walk, um, I like to think of that sort of pivot point that you spoke about being. I'm going to fast forward, being that time when I was 35, and I was living in Saskatchewan at the time, Saskatchewan, Canada, and I had 3 kids, and I had I was teaching, and all of a sudden I had this moment of like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. There was this like almost like knocking at my door of my soul, being like, the we have walked this, we have filled this remembering cup of all of these experiences, and now you're being called towards something different. And so it was this knowing that I had had my whole life, that had been I had been like feeling into, but was never acknowledged by anybody else. And
Mhm.
it wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be. I was meant to be disempowered in my knowing. I was meant to be, you know, there were moments in my relationship with my mom where she'd say jump and I'd say how high. And I was meant to experience all those things. And there was this moment where I was like, I don't know what's coming for me next, but I just know this chapter is over. And in those moments, I think that's where I've learned this piece around forgiveness and letting go and having that unconditional love for those around me. Because in the same way that I signed up for those experiences, so did they. They signed up to play those roles. And I like to say it gives space to like honor myself and honor those relationships with the people in my life that are doing the best they can and are where they are on their journey, and like allows for my own sense of freedom of mind,
Mhm.
freedom in my own sovereignty,
Mhm.
and just gives me that space to show up in a way that is authentic and myself. And it's easy to point fingers at everybody else. We always want to, right? Our mind
Right.
wants to project and wants to be like, this is the reason why, it's this, it's that, it's whoever. And when we take that full accountability to say, there's parts of myself, going back to the beginning of this conversation, I don't want to look behind me, but
Mhm.
those things are all mine that I've been carrying, and I can equally set them down, but I have to look. It's like a GPS. You're saying, I want to go here. Well, you have to give it a starting point. And that's the same thing with our journey. We have to acknowledge, we have to love, we have to accept exactly where we're at, because you can't move forward when you don't know where you are. You have to
Right.
start there.
That is
So anyways,
amazing.
I've jumped around, but
No, that's amazing. And like, there's so many things I want to pull out of that, but I think for me, I want to pull the thread of forgiveness out because
mm,
so I I did not have a location based,
mm,
childhood like you did, right? Where that was the
mhm,
start, that was the catalyst of everything. For me, it
mhm,
was definitely trauma. Um, and that was a main reason why I left, right? But I am at a point now where the person who created that trauma is in stage 4 cancer, right? So that's
mm,
another piece why I went home. And I know that I'm being presented this opportunity to forgive.
mhm,
And for me,
mhm,
I am like, forgiveness feels like a cop out. Why am I giving them that piece of me? Right?
mhm,
But I realized after hearing your story, from what I'm hearing, and I want you to, confirm. For me, forgiveness for you is releasing that attachment and allowing yourself peace, more so
Absolutely.
than giving them, relinquishing their responsibility in whatever it is, the trauma, the whatever. How did you get to that point where, or what, was there a moment where you realized my peace is more important to me than to hold on to this out of spite or out of like not giving that power away? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I realized that by not allowing the forgiveness, because it's for us, it's for myself, that I was still, giving that power away. I was still, my cord was attached to me and I was still plugged in there, like a
Mhm.
socket, rather than taking that cord and plugging it back into myself. And not only did it hand my power back to me, but it it was the energetic space that was created that gave me the peace that I was looking for. The tension is always within ourselves. The tension
Mhm.
that we're feeling, those moments that we're meeting up against something, isn't because of someone. It's because they agreed to, in the same way that we agreed to experience them being that threshold point, being that tension holder. But the tension is always, always a reflection of what we are experiencing. So whether we like it or not that someone else is presenting us with that, that's tough bananas. It's there. It means it lives within you. And so you've got to take all those fingers. I know. And it's
I
not fun.
don't like what I'm hearing, but I understand. I
No
have a
one
lot of growing to do still. But what, like, I understand what you say. Like, what a gift it is to give yourself to be at this point. And I think that
yeah.
it does illuminate for me that I still have some work to do. So thanks. I love that for
You know,
myself. But yeah.
I think it's important to remember that it's like we're not alone in this. I like to think of it like, you can think of it like a tapestry, or you can think of it like a web, or a puzzle, and we're all just kind of floating around, being influenced, being projected on, being tugged on, all simultaneously. And so we have been conditioned to believe that, even even in those hardest moments, like with my relationship with my mom or with my dad, even though I've given that forgiveness, for myself towards either of them, it
Mhm.
does not mean that they still don't take their fingers and point them at me, or point them at an outside situation, and don't take ownership of their peace. That's not my
Right.
responsibility. And that
Right.
also gave me that sense of freedom, is realizing, like, that's not my job. It's not my job to do their walk. But when you think of the tapestry, if or you think of, the throwing the rock in the pond, or you think of, especially with the energies this year, you think of like a horse. When you're around a horse, their own alignment with themselves, their heart coherence, just by being around them, you
Mhm.
feel different. And so when we take our focus and we point our fingers towards ourselves, we have to trust and believe that that's going to create an effect, whether or not we see it, whether or not we know, whether or not we hear it, whether or not it's said to us. It's putting us back into our heart space.
Mm.
And I like to think like that's the seat of our soul. There's that little spot that exists and lives there, where we land in. Our mind wants to be the driver, and it's not, it's the passenger.
Right.
um, but it really gives us that sense of, like, unconditional love for ourselves.
Mhm.
It always comes back to us. It's always like a coherent me for we.
Right. No, it makes sense because that is ultimately all we have is that
Yeah.
heart space, is that soul space. That is ours that we can choose to do whatever we want. We can be in our bitterness. We can be in our forgiveness
Mhm.
era. We can be in our self love era and do things that might seem externally counterproductive. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
for our heart space, it means everything. And that leads me into my last question because there will be a part two. I am preparing everyone because I know I'm not letting her go either. I'm on it. Okay. Um, so my last question for this particular part is how do you feel about, like in a general sense, about taking that trauma and working on it or allowing it to become a part of you and it just migrates into a part of your being? Does that make sense? I think that we're like, I'm starting to
Mhm.
question whether we have this perpetual need to constantly work on
Mhm.
ourselves, right? And I get that.
I
But
know
at
where you're
what
going with
point
this. Yeah.
do we, you know, what point do we're like, you know what, okay, we had a really messed up situation happen. Am
Hmm.
I going to forgive myself and forgive them and do all this stuff? Or do we just go, you know what? I have my quirks. I do things that are different because of this trauma and I'm not interested in fixing it because it's a part of me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, what comes to heart first is I don't think anyone's broken. You come in here whole. You come in here to experience the contrast of the people, places, and experiences that will give you the understanding of that contrast so that when you are met with that threshold energy, you know exactly what it feels like. We have this incessive obsession. I mean, I'll freely say this. I've been in that seat on the other end of the like years of therapy, sitting there just like repeating over and over and over again this story so well that that's the frequency that I'm vibrating in.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to acknowledge, you have to see, you have to witness yourself there. But being in that, sitting in that vibration is not going to be what turns into the embodiment of the opposing energy, of the contrast energy. You don't have to sit in that. You don't have to revel in that, right? I like to, I say like you're marinating in that. You don't have to marinate anymore, especially when we get to this place where we're sort of like entering our embodiment era. You're done marinating. Like you are a well marinated steak. You are ready for the grill. You're ready to give everybody your flavor.
I
Like
want
your
my
cup is full.
peppercorn, I want my
It's full.
butter. No, I get
Exactly.
it. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, like it's time to go get a new cup. And I think we kind of dance on that piece where we're not always fully for some of us, I think what's happening is we're dipping our toes. So we're kind of like taking a sneak peek. Like, do I really want to go enter that?
Mhm.
For some of us, we're dipping our toes into energy that doesn't actually even belong to us. It's not actually ours. Um, and so it's important to have an appropriate like reflector or mirror in your life that is accurately seeing you and isn't projecting what they think they see onto you. And then I think it's important to see that because that is where that loving all the pieces of ourselves come from. We
I
have
love it.
to.
I like, I think I am a believer in therapy, but it gets to a
Mhm.
point where it does get redundant and it's just reaffirming everything, and I love that. I feel like this is where I wanna continue part 2 on this topic, but I'm gonna give a
Mhm.
teaser for next week,
Okay.
is, um, is this your work piece? Is this now that reflector piece, that acknowledgement of energy? Is that where this is leading you into your
This
next
is where
journey?
it's leading me. So I have spent almost the last 7 years sort of um, unraveling the projections, unraveling As I have a girlfriend who says, like, being in my hermitude. I have been in my hermitude, unraveling these energies, unraveling these projections, really figuring out what is mine and meeting myself there.
Mhm.
It's not pretty. It feels like death because it is. It's an energetic death of yourself
Mhm.
and like shedding the layers that don't belong and then witnessing, giving my own self the clarity, receiving the clarity from correct mirrors, um, and moving myself through those patterns so that I can step into this embodiment of the contrast because we're all meant to walk that. I'm
Yep.
a medium rare steak now.
I love it, and I wanna talk
I'm ready to
about
be grilled.
I wanna talk about the grilling, the medium rare, and what it looks like to be serving that.
Yeah.
What's the side dishes? I need to
Yeah.
know all the things around this steak, and I'm gonna stop a sec because there's gonna be part 2, okay? So,
Amazing. Amazing.
um, can
Yes.
so I'm just gonna say that if anyone wants to reach out to you, you are on Instagram.
Yep.
Um,
They can find me at the coherent heart
Perfect,
underscore the
and
coherent
I'll do a semi-professional thing. Don't get used to this,
heart.
people. I will drop a link, just directly to,
Amazing.
Instagram below, and, you know what? Stay tuned, part 2's coming, okay? Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the
Amazing.
flip side.